reason. I believe that many people have a need for solitude, maybe all people, I don't know. Maybe it's part of our DNA, but I know it's part of mine. And I didn't understand it. I misdiagnosed it as loneliness. And I didn't even know for quite some time that it was loneliness. It was just that I would do certain things to try and escape or be rid of a kind of inner uncomfortableness, uh, being out of sorts, if you will. And but when I was younger, to say that you're lonely sounded like you were a loser. And when we're younger, we don't like to feel like losers. Uh, when we're older, we're able to kind of look at these things. So I remember I did pretty well in high school and college because I was always around people, it seems. And when I wasn't around people, I read a lot of books. I worked in a mailroom for an advertising agency in New York City. And when I wasn't doing something with mail, I'd be reading novel after novel after novel. And I think it was just an attempt, now as I look back, to deal with being lonely. Uh, Actually, it was a desire for solitude. And in the solitude is where there is the prayer. So when I got out of college, I thought, what was I going to do with my life? And I thought I would go in the Peace Corps. So there was that piece in me that wanted to be of some service. But I was way too young to know that my way of being of service was through getting in touch with my need for solitude, which is why I'm teaching today, fulfilling that. But way back then, I couldn't figure it out. So I thought, I'm going to go in the Peace Corps. I lasted 9 days. I don't know anybody who went in the Peace Corps for 9 days. We went and we lived in Chicago at Roosevelt College on the south side. I think it was 35th Street or Avenue, whatever they are there. And this is 1965. You know, race relations were not great in Chicago in 1965. It's certainly not the south side. So here I am. And I said, oh, this isn't for me, because I was in love. And I was in love with a young lady. But she was really the solution. And I realized I just was more lonely in those 9 days in the Peace Corps. But I said I was lonely for her. It was all about solitude, and through solitude to be of service. I needed to get in touch with my solitude to be in the Peace Corps, but I was backwards. So I left the Peace Corps against a lot of people's advice, went back to my girlfriend, who of course I lost, because I guess she must have figured out at some point that she was supposed to be my solution. And then I just tried various other things to fill up my life, but none of them ever did. And so until I got this inclination that God loved me unconditionally, and why don't I pay a little more attention? And that came in solitude in my latter 20s. So that's when I joined the Paulist Fathers when I was 29. Interestingly enough, Henry David Thoreau moved to Walden Pond when he was 28. So let's go turn to him, because I have found him to be such a source of encouragement for me, and maybe for those of you who are missing out, who have a need for solitude but don't know it, and just going crazy in COVID. To me, COVID offered me an opportunity for solitude once I got over the fear, because all my busyness was taken away from me, and all my escapes from solitude were taken away from me. And I just finally fell right into it up here at the monastery, which is a great place for solitude and through Zoom to be of service. So Henry David Thoreau was a New England fellow, Massachusetts. He was born in 1817. He died when he was 44, interestingly enough, from pneumonia, from a bad walk, wrong clothes, wrong weather. But he got to know a couple of people. He's very educated. He went to Harvard, and he knew several languages, which was a great help to him in his writing and in his reading. We'll get to that. He was a member of Walt Emerson, who was a well-known 19th century American searcher. But these were not men searching as in traveling from one place to another. These were inner searches. And Emerson, so they were part of a transcendentalist group, kind of mystical. They were looking for something, the innards for happiness and fulfillment. And to a transcendentalist, religion, organized religion, is not too much. The highest authority is not religion, but your individual conscience. It would help if your individual conscience had a guide to help you, but you need to get in touch with your individual conscience, which I couldn't do when I was way back young. I did not have a guide. I never had anybody suggest to me that solitude might be my issue. So individual conscience are what these people are talking about in the first half of the 19th century. Meanwhile, about that time, the Roman Catholic Church, of which I am a member, was not talking about individual conscience. It was talking about shape up and do what the Pope tells you. That's very much anti-transcendentalist, I'll tell you. So what did Thoreau do for a living besides go to school? Well, he worked for a while as a surveyor. Now, that's outdoor work, being in nature. And he also was part of a pencil business. His dad ran a pencil business. You know, these little things here, somebody's got to make back then. His dad had a pencil business. And Thoreau would work a little at that, not too much. He didn't want to do more work than he had to. As a matter of fact, when he really got rolling with the Walden Pond stuff and all, he'd work six weeks a year. He said, that's all the income I need. I keep my needs low. He was very much non-consumer society guy, which is why I kind of like him. He's so anti the way we are today in the United States. So obviously he's not much for organized religion. He feels that religion is that which is never spoken. So the reason that it attracts me is because I'm so interested in the solitude and silence of a contemplative prayer. And the sort of direct encounter, this was very big in the 19th century. I think I taught about Kierkegaard, the existentialist, the direct encounter with the divine without any religious organizational intermediary. And of course, this is not too much for some organized religion that would be very authoritarian, like Roman Catholicism. But it is very much part of the contemplative journey and so someone who would be Catholic and contemplative would kind of try to figure out how to put the two together. That you still needed, in spite of your organized religion way, you still needed to have that one-on-one, no intermediary encounter, which one can only get in solitude and silence, however you do it. And he did it. Not just sitting there in some sort of contemplative practice, lotus position. He also did it by walking in the woods. And he didn't walk for exercise. He sauntered. We got a big thing about exercise in our country. Get fit, get skinny, exercise, gym, go to the gym. Some of this is just an escape too, I think. Some of it, not all. But he would saunter because he wanted to be open to what nature showed. He said, nature is the face of God. He didn't say the tree was God, but it's the face of God. It reveals the divine, the holy. It wasn't that he didn't believe in a God, just didn't find it in a host. So he's not much for the authoritarian religion. He's more for freedom. He says authority cuts off freedom. And of course, our country is very much about freedom. And the founder of the Paulist Fathers, Isaac Hecker, felt that our sense of freedom and the values of the Catholic Church could come together, and which is why the Paulist Fathers were founded. It's not that freedom is anti to my particular church. It's just that authoritarianism is not going to be the be all and the end all. You have to have the freedom as well, the individual conscience and the direct encounter with God. So, of course, he's not much for Calvinistic ideology that was very prominent in New England. That is the prosperity gospel that we would have today. Capitalism, hard work, do as best as you can, make a lot of money, so to speak. And he just thought that would just take you away. Certainly would take him away from his whole sense of getting in touch with his inner self, which more and more he found to be in solitude and silence. So he studied several languages. He studied Greek, Latin, and French. He went to Harvard, 1834 to 37, and there he studies Italian, German, and Spanish. But he has no desire to travel to these countries. There's a big travel industry in this country, and some of it, I mean, a lot of it's good, but some of it is just an escape. I'm always amazed at when I was living whenever I lived in so well-to-do communities, people would they would buy homes that were overpriced to live in communities so that they could get away, always wanting to go on vacation. Says, why did you live here in the first place if you always wanted to be away? So that was not for him. But what he wanted to do, he wanted the interior travel. And because he could read these languages, such as French or German, it opened to him a lot of spiritual writings that were not available to us. They were not even available to me in the 1950s. They still weren't translated from French and German into English. When I went looking for spiritual writings when I was just starting to sense some sort of spiritual something I needed, and I'd go to a bookstore that's supposed to have a religious section, even a Catholic bookstore, there's a small section on solitude and silence, not a whole lot, but there was a whole lot that had been written, and it had been written for centuries, but it wasn't translated into English. So we in the United States didn't have this, but he had it because he could read it. And also being friends with Emerson. Emerson had a huge library of Oriental philosophy, things Zen, Hinduism, Buddhism, Eastern Orthodoxy. We're very much more into contemplative life and less into the prosperity gospel. His brother was a very close friend of his, but his brother died relatively young, which that hurt in one way, but it also allowed him to go live in Walden Pond. So he had Emerson. Orestes Bronson was also his buddy, who was a buddy of Isaac Hecker, the founder of the Paulist Fathers. And what they're talking about is get in touch with your inner voice and learn to live with it. Why are you going to do that? Not being busy, not making a lot of money, not running around trying to have a holiday. He says, get still and get silent, because that's where the inner voice is going to work. But you can be still sauntering around in the woods, if you will, or I suppose by the ocean, by a beach. It just, just as long as you're trying to get in touch with the nature that God made, not the mall that big package stores made. So he reads a lot of these books, and he sees this emphasis on interiority and detachment. That's very Zen, interiority and detachment. Well, I didn't read about that when I was growing up. So I didn't have any guide in terms of books, or I don't remember meeting anybody that said this was important, and any priest or anything like that. Maybe they were there and I was too stupid to notice it. But emphasis on interiority and detachment, getting in touch with the world of your interior self letting go of all those things that detract you from taking the time for that. This is what he was reading, being written for centuries. Uh, Now, you'd think, oh, was this guy just kind of an airhead? Actually, not. He wrote a great tract essay on civil disobedience, and it was read by Gandhi and Martin Luther King. You know, we hear, I've talked about Gandhi in terms of he influenced Rabbi Schachter, Zalman Schachter, who I talked about, and others. Howard Thurman, who I'm talking about, he introduced it. Well, who influenced Gandhi? Henry David Thoreau influenced Gandhi because he wrote on civil disobedience. Because he get in touch with his inner self, and he look around at the world, and he says, "This isn't right. This is just not right." So he was a guy who would not let a culture control him. So he was part of the Underground Railroad. He did help people get through. Trying to get to Canada, he was part of the Underground Railroad. So he might have been detached from the material world in that sense, but he was still active in the world, which of course you can do very well from the energy of silence and solitude and getting in touch with the interior self. When he was only at Walden Pond for 2 years. And I haven't told you yet. Did he buy land? No, Hammerson owned the land in the woods, and he gave him an opportunity. He says, "Here, go here and do your thing." And so he went to Walden Pond. He built himself his own place. I guess he was pretty good with wood. He made pencils. I guess he could build shacks or build his little cabin right in the middle of Emerson's woods. So he had the benefit of, he could work just 6 weeks a year because he didn't have to buy anything except, build. And he lived there for 2 years. But occasionally he would go into town and have dinner at his mom's in Concord. And his mom and his sister did his laundry. So it wasn't, you don't need to put the guy on a pedestal and say, "I could never be like him." That's not it at all. You can have all your little compromises in a sense and still get in touch with a great interior self. If you ever to read the book Walden, much less the one on civil disobedience. So what he would do, well, because he had a pond, Walden Pond, and he would live there, in the winter too. But in the summer, this is Massachusetts. Well, he had himself, built himself a rowboat. And he would go and he'd row out into the middle of the pond, and then he'd stop, and he'd lay on his back. So he built the boat so he could just lie on his back in the boat, and he would have his ecstasies. Just think of lying in the boat in the middle of a lake, looking up at the sky, nobody bugging you. It's kind of his own lake in a sense. His nearest neighbor was 1 mile away. Occasionally he'd see a neighbor. So he felt that when he was doing something like this, and just a challenge, you find you're this, when time and space would dissolve around him. So he wasn't sitting in a corner in a lotus position in any particular prayerful practice, no centering prayer type things. These are all things that a lot of us have to do because we're so immersed in the busyness of life. We have to have these special practices, methods, if you will. But he was able to get away from that because he chose a lifestyle in which these things were kind of opened to him more naturally, if you will. So you have to ask yourself, if you've got to work so hard to find 20 minutes of silence and solitude, you might look at, why is your life like that you got to work so hard to find 20 minutes for silence and solitude? So he just felt that time and space dissolved all around him. And as he just lay in the bottom of his boat, and he would have ecstasy sometimes, transcendent, but they had no devotional or religious content. He didn't envision Jesus Christ or holy card images. They were what he would call featureless epiphanies, no images. Well, did he have access to the cloud of unknowing, which was written in Middle English in the 1300s? I don't know. He doesn't reference it, but I reference it. This is exactly what the cloud of unknowing is talking about. He says you have to deal with the cloud of forgetfulness. You got to put everything else aside and open, and then hit up against the cloud of unknowingness, which is God is no image. God is beyond all images. So in a sense, Thoreau got this, but he didn't write it down as the uh, Roman Catholic cloud of unknowing author did. But he still had it. He had this direct access to the divine, who was without images, without thoughts, without words, lying on the bottom of his boat. So they're called featureless epiphanies. And he knew that he was gifted in this way to have this inner peace if he would just find a lifestyle for it. I didn't know that. And many of us don't know that. I didn't know that solitude was a gift. I just misinterpreted it sometimes as loneliness and not an opportunity for solitude. To be alone with yourself, but in touch with your interior reality, is not loneliness. It's ecstasy. Now, sometimes it's boring. I suppose he was boring sometimes. He didn't say he always had ecstasies. Maybe sometimes he was bored. Maybe sometimes it rained on him. Okay, this is what happens. But ultimately, you're going to have some pretty powerful experiences if you give yourself to it on some, not only a regular basis, but a lifestyle basis. And that is certainly what is available to me in this monastery, is a lifestyle basis. And I could easily get caught up in being very, very busy doing other things, too many other things, and not opening myself to what's being offered here. So many of you may be gifted in this way, gifted towards direction and energy, towards an inner peace that we block. But he was, in terms of my tradition, he was sealed off in some ways from the spiritual traditions of, say, Catholicism, because there was the Know Nothing Party back then. There was a lot of anti-Catholicism back then. There was even then there was a sectarian nature of the culture, and prejudices in the 19th century Christian churches against Roman Catholicism. So where would that come up short? Well, maybe there'd be no Teresa of Avila for him, no Meister Eckhart, no Augustine. So Thoreau, in a sense, by not having this, he missed out in one way of knowing that he had predecessors. He had predecessors. He had people before him, like the cloud of unknowing, who were encouraging this, even in organized religion, and probably suffering some from the authorities. But he didn't have that. But if he was more what we would call the apophatic tradition, that is, no images in your deep moments of I might use the word ecstasy, but it can be ecstasy. Your deep moments of a sense of oneness with the world around you, oneness with the divine. And he was getting that in his boat, and he was getting that in his sauntering around when he look at nature. And he says, nature is a scripture. It's teaching us of God's presence. And what do we do today? We destroy it. And he even saw it then. He says, all you want to do is cut down the trees, and you don't see the power and the presence of the holy in them. So another thing that left him somewhat alone, he actually proposed marriage, and he was rejected. So he remained seen. Now, maybe he was rejected because the woman looked at him and says, you're not a suitable partner for me. And I feel the same way. Thank God nobody ever wanted to marry me, because I would not have been a suitable partner. I was much more like Walden Pond, and much less like living in the suburbs with wife, kids, and so on and so forth. Um, so he did remain single. He took a shot at being married. In other words, later on, when he got a little, he was 28 when he goes to Walden Pond. So it's not too much later on. He realized that some of the rejection, if you will, was really a gift for him to pursue his life. And that's what I've seen. I said, thank God nobody wanted to marry me, because that was a real gift to me to freed me up as slowly as it happened to realize the direction in which I was really meant to go. So, and some of you who are a little bit older, widows, widowers, it's, oh, I'm single, I'm all alone. Oh my gosh. Well, yes, of course, there's missing, there should be. I mean, there was love, there was family, but also now, is there an opportunity for more silence and solitude? It's a question to ask. So, yeah, Nathaniel Hawthorne, many of you have studied any kind of American history. You remember Nathaniel Hawthorne, he was a writer, and he had a daughter who I think became a Roman Catholic and did a lot of stuff in the Catholic Church. Anyway, Hawthorne moves to Concord, which is where Thoreau's home was, not too far by car and a highway, but otherwise far. And Hawthorne moves there with his new bride. And so he gets to know Thoreau. They even ice skated together on the Concord River. So it wasn't as if Thoreau spent 24/7 out in the woods. So he gets this small plot of land, and at 28 years of age, in 1845, he goes there and he builds himself a small cabin. Well, I have a big cabin. It's called St. Benedict's Monastery in Snowmass, with 3,600-acre ranch surrounding me. So I've got my cabin. So he moves there. His nearest neighbor is a mile away, and I'd say our nearest neighbor is maybe even farther than that. So he's a bit like St. Anthony of the Desert, who was considered the founder of Western monasticism. And that he went out and he lived in the desert by himself in the 3rd century, and everybody thought he was crazy. And he lived there for many, many years, I think 50 years in the desert. I mean, Thoreau lasted 2 in Walden Pond. But he didn't stop his practice. He just lasted 2 in Walden Pond. And what did Anthony the Desert do? He practiced simplicity, a simple life. To survive, that's what the Desert Fathers and Mothers did. They didn't work more than they had to, because they weren't about work. They were about the interior life, but they had to work, so they worked what they needed to. But beyond that, no. So it's the same with him. He works a bit. He works as he does a little handyman work. Obviously, he can build little things. He grew his own garden. So feed yourself, right? There was the pencil business that he had to keep a little bit in touch with 6 weeks a year. And he didn't mind company. He enjoyed company. So he wasn't antisocial, but he had his priorities. That's what I think is so. What are your priorities? If I go to bed at night and I look and I say, "Hey, I didn't do any solitude and silence. What did I do?" And I realized I changed my whole priorities. I made all these other things important, and didn't get around to what's really important. The reason I'm not here to become a runner. I'm not here to become a cook. I'm not here to become a librarian. Although I do those things, I don't run a walk. I got to keep my priorities. And that was his. He said he enjoyed company. I enjoy company, but none of it's going to get in the way of the need for that solitude and silence and stillness. He didn't want it, in his case, he didn't want to intrude on his writing. He liked to write. Matter of fact, he was a terrible speaker. He tried to make a living later as a speaker. It was no good. I guess one of the things you have to do as a speaker is please the people you're speaking to. And he didn't work that way, but he could write well. And so he's remembered for his writings, not for his speaking. So he didn't want anything to intrude on his writing and his contemplation. So he'd get up, say at sunrise, no alarm clocks, get up when it's light. sunrise. He enjoyed a lot of sunrises. And he'd go to about noon, he'd say, on most days. And what he wanted in that time was undisturbed solitude and stillness. It didn't mean he had to be still physically. He had to have an interior stillness, which one could do sauntering around or preparing your breakfast slowly. You could read about all this stuff in Zen Buddhism, about how to make tea, for crying out loud. And just don't rush around doing things if you don't have to. And he wasn't cooking for a monastery, so he didn't have to worry about that. He's just taking care of himself. Simple lifestyle, simple food. And we go about it very deliberately. I'm going to do something down the road in some months from now on cooking and contemplation, which will build on Thoreau, but that's down the road. Any case, that's what he wanted. He wanted to have stillness, interior stillness, and he wanted the solitude to have that. And you think of us, we're a nation of doers. He would do what he needed to do to keep his priorities. And for many of us, because we're doers, we don't know what to do when we're not doing. That's one of the reasons that COVID drives people crazy, because they're trying to fill up their lives with doing and with interaction with people and staying busy and accomplishing. And I asked this question, are you too trying not to be lonely? When in fact, lonely is just to cover up what you want is solitude and you're running from it. And so I think that the people who are most bothered by what they would call isolation from COVID are people who just don't know what to do when they're by themselves. They absolutely don't know what to do. And I spent years not knowing what to do with by myself, and I satisfied it in so many other ways that were very debilitating. It took me a long time to realize that being by myself was a priority. If I did that by myself the same way that Thoreau was doing it, in solitude, a certain stillness, openness to nature, the world around me. And work what you have to work, but don't do more than you need to, otherwise you upset your priorities. So he felt that he was not in for travel. He knew all these languages. He wants to travel the interior journey. In other words, what he said is, why don't you be your own Columbus? He supposedly founded the Western Hemisphere. Why don't you be your own Columbus? Travel the interior journey. And that's what he wanted to do. And his cloister, if you will, were the waterways and the woods of Concord. A lot of rivers up there. And the waterways and the woods of Concord. In other words, Walden Pond, water comes to it and empties out someplace. So there's rivers. And I remember going into our novitiate. It was in Oak Ridge, New Jersey, which is probably very suburban by now, but we had, I think, about 1,100 acres we had. And we had a pond. I don't think I'd read Thoreau yet. But I was attracted to that. Sometimes I would just go out and walk around. We didn't have really paths. We didn't develop the 1,100 acres, which I wish we had. But I used to like to go out and walk what paths I could find, just kind of walk around and that should have been an indication to me, because I didn't see any other guys doing this. Maybe they were, but I didn't see it. And it should have been an indication, Terry, if you're going to be a Paulist priest, you got to find how to be a Paulist priest in solitude and silence and stillness. And there'll be little indications here and there that was part of my vocational call. And thank gosh, the Paulist fathers didn't get in the way of it. But actually were a help to it. And we did ice skate on that pond in the wintertime. We tried to play ice hockey, whatever. But we did ice skate on that pond. when it was cold enough. So that really can be a cloister. The outdoor world is a cloister if it is helping you to prioritize your interior life. It is not a cloister if you are escaping by being there. You can ask yourself, if you go backpacking, did you have an sort of ecstatic experiences? And maybe you did. Maybe it was just a hard walk. Who knows? I have no desire to go backpacking. I have no desire to climb up to 14,000-foot hills, to tell someone I did this and I did that. I went here and an aspen tree is an aspen tree, no matter where it is. And if you're open, you'll see the face of God in the one outside your window, or a 20-minute walk, as you would a 6-hour climb up to 12,000 feet. So I don't have that, but I did have that at some time. I did have that, but I'm finished with that. I'm done. So that was his cloister. And he felt that we kind of abuse that beautiful nature. We use it and abuse it instead of letting it come to us and teach us, as he did in his sauntering. So he felt that society does not have a mortgage on my life. It doesn't own me because I'm not working for somebody. So society has no mortgage on my life. Worked for his dad. I guess it was let him be. He's kind of self-employed in that sense. So society has no mortgage on my life. In that sense, he was free. And that's what you get from working as little as you need to work. Or someone might say, well, a pension, a Social Security, whatever. And he felt that the mind has to slumber. Now, he didn't say the body has to go to sleep. He said the mind has to slumber. In other words, it has to stop this train, being on this train of thoughts, so much which are driven by fear, by anxiety, by the tensions of life that some we bring on ourselves. Was that COVID's such a tension? And I'll ask people, well, there are some things, it really is a tension for some people in some situations, but for a lot of people, it's a tension because they can't continue to practice the escape mechanisms they used to have to escape themselves. That's what COVID has done for them. And that's why they wish it would go away so they could get back to the way things were. And as I remember, a little over a year ago, the way things were is everybody was too darn busy. I'm so busy. I have no time. COVID gave you a ton of time and you rejected it. You'd rather go back to being very busy. So something to think about. And I think he helps us to think it. But the mind must slumber for inner wisdom to come. And I think that is, think of slumber as a darkness. I mean, when you sleep, your eyes are closed. So it's a spiritual slumber in which you actually need the darkness. There was a fellow, Suzuki Roshi. He lived in the United States, I know that. And he spent a lot of time on the West Coast with the Zen community out there in the San Francisco Bay Area, but he was other places as well. And he said, seek the darkness. Cloud of unknowing again. And a lot of the tradition, the contemplative tradition of my own religion, seek the darkness, the cloud of unknowing. In other words, stop trying to get holy card images of God to make you feel better. It's okay, but it's not very deep. It appeals to the imagination and the mind. Okay, those need to be fed sometimes, but you've got a much deeper life that you're ignoring. And that's why we have all this anxiety and all this escapism. And why I meet so many Roman Catholics who said, oh, I love church and I love my religion and I like these pious novenas. And yet I can see in them the tension, the anxiety. because they've just ignored so much. And so I talk about it, and a few listen. Most think I'm nuts or whatever. I'm just, oh well, whatever. And I may be. So, but a lot of people thought Henry David Thoreau was nuts, as well as the whole transcendental. They thought Isaac Hecker, the founder of the Paulists, was a crazy guy too. In other words, a lot of people who are living on the edges of the culture are considered crazy, and yet they're the ones who are pushing the pencil, if you will. They're pushing it. They're pushing the edges out. They're saying, it's just not working. This culture is lacking something. It can be a beautiful culture, but it lacks something still. And I think that's what the spiritual tradition of the interior life is trying to bring to our culture in the West. And he was very much a Westerner. So he said, behold the beauty. It's invisible. In other words, someone can take a walk in the woods. They see nothing else. I take a walk in the woods. I got a little exercise. So what are you talking about, Father Ryan? Well, it's invisible unless you can see with the inner eye, which is, I think that's Buddhist. See with the inner eye. So we have it. We have this idea. We just use different words in the Western tradition, that there is the divine beauty in nature. God made the universe. It comes right out of Genesis, or something made it. I happen to call it God. In other words, there's something behind all this, and within it. It's not just hiding behind it; it's hiding within it. But we have the interior vision, if we can get in touch with, to see the beauty of a walk in the woods. And so he said, that's where I see God. He was not a disbeliever. He's just not looking at a host to find it. He's not into religion, organized. So he's there 1845 to 1847. And he would, he had his sort of dawn to noon thing. He would read and write in the mornings and the evenings. So he kind of wanted to be left alone till noon, but in the mornings and the evenings, especially when he would write. So he'd write again in the evenings. Now remember, what is evening? No electricity out there. Evening is early for us. You go to bed pretty early, and in the winter, it's even earlier. So, but he would read and write in the mornings and the evenings because he wanted that time with nature. He would take these 4-hour sojourns. He'd call them meditative sojourns in the afternoon. 4 hours of going about. Now, so this is kind of crazy, isn't it? Doing all that. But yet, you will find people admiring someone outside of our culture. You'd find us some monk of another tradition, some Eastern tradition, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever, Zen, Chan. Oh, wow, he's so wonderful. And he'd say he meditates 4 hours a day. Oh, that sounds great. But here, this guy goes walking in the woods 4 hours and you think he's crazy. The closer someone gets to your reality and your culture, the more they have to be crazy so that you don't have to change. It's easy for you to admire someone far away who's not part of your daily world and look up to that person and want to learn from that person. It's much harder to listen to someone who's in your culture who says, and I didn't choose what you chose to do all day long. You don't like to hear that. So we generally reject people right around us who are most like us, if you will. So he was in danger of being considered a loafer. He even wrote that. He said, yeah, I know. People think I might be a loafer. But he said, I got to be me, so to speak. Isn't that a song like that? I got to be me. Now, in 1850, finished, he's moved to there's a new home. I guess his family bought a new home in Concord. With the pencil business, was pretty successful, I guess. And I often ask, what did he write with? I guess he wrote with pencils. That, living out in the woods, you just can't go to the local store and pick up some ink. So maybe he wrote a lot of his stuff in pencils. So he moves in. He lives in the attic. He lives there till he dies. which I think was 1864, did I say? 14 years later, he died. So he lived there 1862, so for 12 years. But he did things there. It's not, he took care of his dying father. His father died in 1859. In other words, this guy's got compassion. He's got patience. He's got care. He can do it, and he does it when it needs to be done. But he doesn't go looking for it. So, as I said, he tried the lecture circuit, and he wasn't successful. It's important to find out what you can do and not do. It's important to find out what you're really called to do. So I'm not called to be a lecturer. He was just trying to make a buck so he could live, I guess, or at least talk about his writings, but it just didn't work. Maybe it was too opinionated. I don't know. He was just better at writing. And so he wrote this essay on civil disobedience. He was against slavery. He thought that was cockeyed. And as I said, it inspired Gandhi and King. And he felt that his obligations, what he must do for society, was slight and passing. In other words, he felt his writing was his commitment to society. Some of us feel to be useful to society, we have to be doing things with people and stuff. If you find your true vocational call, which his was, as I've been talking about, and through that came his writing, and his writing was what he was going to share with the world. It's still being read today. Years and years, centuries later, it's still being read today. And so he does have an obligation to be who God called him to be. And that's how he's going to make his best help to society. And so I have to keep that in mind. Somebody says, Father, why don't you do this? We need you for this. And I said, that wasn't my call. Your need is not necessarily my call. And I have to keep that in mind. It's a struggle. Yes, it's a struggle to make sure that I'm not, a loafer. I don't want to be a loafer. So in 1854, he publishes Walden, which is the book that many people speak about. You want to read it? It's a short book. He might have written a lot, but or maybe he didn't write a lot, but that's what got published, that and Civil Disobedience. So he wrote Walden. And what does he talk about? My gosh, does it speak to us today? And when I look back on the people who I thought were quite interesting to me, and because they would be interesting to me because of my my call to more solitude, and that is through that I will gift the people with help and ministry. The people in the 20th century that I was looking at in my life often read Thoreau, and they were touched by Thoreau. He was sort of the American Zen. A lot of people are running off to look at Eastern practices and stuff, and Thoreau had it. It was right there. What did he say in Walden? The superficiality of the American life. Isn't that what we hear so much when we actually want to listen to someone? The superficiality of American life. Is that what you want to get back to? I ask myself, do I want to get back to superficiality? And where was I superficial and so on and so forth? He said the superficial, soul-wasting materialism is what he calls it. That's the superficial. He said, it's not materialism in itself. His father ran a pencil business, It's the soul-wasting materialism. More and more and more is soul wasting. One drink might be uplifting. Many drinks are soul wasting. And some work is uplifting. Too much work is soul wasting. So there's too much exercise, too much gym, too much busyness, is also wasting. It's the more. M-O-R-E, of our culture. I don't have enough. I got to do more. What are you running from? Is what I asked Terry Ryan. And I've kind of come to a bit of a conclusion about that. Excesses, he says, that's what's so super. The excesses, the ruin. Yeah. If you didn't put rules against the size of houses in Boulder County, people would build huge mansions that they don't really need. And who cleans these things? And then they don't stay in them very much because they're traveling. It is just something else. And he says excesses. And he says, what do these excesses do? They ruin the natural world. So he's not only involved in anti-slavery, he's involved in environment. And I remember I just had this, I moved to, I guess I wasn't really an environmentalist, but I had lived in San Francisco for 3 years before I joined the Pulse. And back then, even 69 to 72, very liberal town. There was an interest in environmentalism. And, these redwood trees are very valuable. And of course, they were out there and I would go see redwood trees and don't cut them down. So I'm sent on my first assignment out of the seminary to Houston, Texas. And they had just built the rectory, 1976. It was a brand new rectory, probably only a couple of months old. And I get out of the car and I look at it. It's a redwood building. They built it in redwood. And that struck me. What is this town all about? Well, let me tell you, Houston, Texas was anything but environmentally conscious. It's still the same way today. So, and here he had it way back when. He didn't have any redwood trees, but he says, you don't see the beauty of God in this stuff. You just see it as for utilitarian purposes. Build it bigger. So he felt that the town, his local town, Concord, I guess, his local town, he said, has no interest in forests. And remember, there's a lot of forests in Massachusetts in the mid-1850s. He said their only interest is in to cut them down. He had this way back when. So environmentalists know about Henry David Thoreau. Now, I'll finish this up and then we're going to stop. He was a very caregiving contemplative because his father was dying. He nursed his father, took care of his father, drops everything, takes care of his father. And after his father died, he then became the boss of the pencil business. But he only lived 1862, so he didn't have enough time to ruin it or anything. But he did run the pencil. He had to keep it going. Employees and so on and so forth. So he did what he needed to do. Always trying to keep his priorities. So here he became a CEO of a business. So he wasn't a loafer, but he kept his priorities, even with that he had learned and harnessed. So I say to myself, what's my future? I don't know. Will I be here forever? I'm not saying that. But I know this is a grounding for if there's going to be something later, if there is a later for me at my age, it's a grounding for something later. So he was grounded so he could be a CEO for the pencil business and still be a contemplative. He died in 1862, and really it was he caught pneumonia. It's one of those things, took a walk, wrong clothes, wrong time, wrong weather, rain and cold. And he refused opiates. He wanted to keep his mind clear, even to the end, because he wanted to try to detach. He'd practiced so much, he wanted to physically detach from the agony in his lungs. I think it's quite a saintly guy in many ways. So we're going to stop with that. We're going to do much more for Thoreau next month, the third Saturday of May. I don't know what that is, but Chris Lake is going to tell us in a minute. And it's going to be the same Zoom channel. It's going to be 9 a.m. And it's going to be part 2 of COVID contemplation, if you would, or isolation versus solitude. And Henry David Thoreau is our background. It's going to be May 15th, okay? May 15th, before Memorial Day. and it may still be snowing up here. So, Chris, you take over. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to do. It gives you a chance to think of questions. You can either write them in the chat room. Chris will explain that to you, or you can just raise your hand. When we get to that, we're going to spend 10 minutes. 10-minute break, Chris?
10-minute break. And we'll be
10-minute
back.
break.
We'll be back at 10:10.
10:10, and then we're going to do a 20-minute solitude and silence or centering prayer, whatever it is you do. Okay, see you in 10 minutes. Hi, Bebs. Okay, we're back, I think. Yes, we're back. All right. Well, welcome back, everybody who came back. Oh, I see a lot of people watching Prince Philip's funeral. I do not know whether Prince Philip was influenced by Thoreau. I don't know much at all about Prince Philip, except what I see on The Crown, and I haven't heard him mentioning Thoreau or any other American writer for that matter. All right. Well, remember that this is recorded and can be found by going to snowmassbookstore.com, and the YouTube site will be posted there. But for now, we're going to do our 20-minute centering prayer. And not center, whatever you do. In other words, I don't think that you're lying in the bottom of a rowboat. So that's probably not an option at the moment. But whatever it is that you want to do, however you do it, we're going to do it for 20 minutes. So keep your microphone off. I'm getting the app up that will set us for 20 minutes. It has a nice little gong to it that when it goes off. So some people say, what am I supposed to be doing? Well, I would suggest, like Thoreau, don't pay attention to your thoughts or images that come into your head, and don't talk. So you can avoid talking by not talking. You avoid focusing on the images in your head by maybe recognizing your breathing whenever you notice you're focusing on images in your head. Otherwise, let the images become background. And you're just trying to be open to your interior world and the presence of whatever is there by not paying attention much at all to the exterior world. So that's what we'll do for 20 minutes. Ready? Okay, for 20 minutes. For some of you, it took forever. For me, it was a little faster than it seemed, which is always good, I think. Just a couple of things while you're thinking of questions. I am going to be giving a talk next week to a group in San Francisco, Most Holy Redeemer Church. And I'm not going to say too much of it because you have to pay to get in. So you have to you have to get in touch with them. And the address that you have to get in touch with is centering at mhr.org. I suppose I should put that in if somebody wanted it to. Everyone. Centering at, I can't even spell, centering at mahr.org. That's Most Holy Redeemer Church. But you get in touch with them, and I think you have to pay something. I'm not sure what. Maybe it's a donation, but then they tell you the site. I'm going to be talking some of what I'm talking about here, so I'm not saying it's a must. And we're going to be doing more of this next month. With them, I'm going to be doing a little bit of Julian of Norwich, and who was an anchoress. To talk about living in isolation, but she loved it, and she went there when she was 30. Notice 28 for Thoreau. So that's next week, but it's not till 11 o'clock Mountain Time. It's a little late even for me, but they're calling the shots. But if you did want to support me, you don't have to. This talk is free, but I will be in debtor's prison giving my presentation next month if I don't get some help. And you can do that at my Venmo address, which is Terry, Terry -Ryan, RYAN -25, if you have a Venmo account. Or you send a check up here to Snowmass Trappist Monastery, and Chris will put all that up in the chat. Any case, let's get back and see. Someone said he was born in the summer of his 27th year, or something like that. Anyways, about that time that he went up to late 20s, right? Late 20s when I joined the Paulist, 30 Julian. So it takes a couple of years to try a couple of things. But let's see what kind of questions we might have. You can raise your hand to Chris, who can see everybody, or just put it on chat or unmute yourself. Any one of those. See if we have any questions.
Father Terry, Michael's asking, he says, I was in a conversation earlier today focused on becoming Christ as we receive Christ from each other into the private depths of ourselves. Someone mentioned receiving God or the ultimate reality into the depth of ourselves through nature, through a flower or a tree. Do you think this was Thoreau's experience during his 4-hour sojourns?
Well, since he wasn't in touch with Roman Catholicism, and he didn't seem to be much for the whole Calvin Presbyterian system and so on and so forth. I don't think he would necessarily use the same terms that someone like me might use in my religion, which is Christ consciousness, Christ-centered. He would say he would see the face of God. He would experience God. He doesn't mean he sees a face like a holy card face. It's a terminology. So what we believe, I just speak for myself, in my tradition, Roman Catholicism, is that Christ is present in everyone, and not just in baptized people, in everyone. So there is that Christ presence, but we don't see it, many of us, because we don't have enough in our interior life. And we do I think when we serve others, and I think this comes very much from the contemplative life, serving others is a way that we exhibit the Christ presence in us, and the way that we express the Christ presence in them. I'll give you an example. At tomorrow's gospel that I'll be talking on, by the way, 8 a.m. our time, and you can find that. Chris will tell you how to do that. 8:15 our Mountain Time. In the gospel, they give Jesus. He says, "You got anything to eat?" And these guys are so befuddled by the fact that they're looking at this fellow they thought was dead, even though they had heard from some women, they had heard from guys on the road to Emmaus, they had heard about. They still couldn't believe. They couldn't keep them up. They're stuck. So he's standing there, and they're all befuddled, incredulous, and they don't even think that he might be hungry. In other words, he's raised up, but he's got a body. He hasn't anything to eat. He's been running around revealing himself. He's got anything to eat? So, and they give him a fish, a baked fish. Well, I happen to be the fish guy up here. I baked the fish. And that made me think, that gospel, about every time I feed the monks up here with fish, instead of saying these worthless monks, they don't appreciate my fish. That would be one way of looking at it. But if I'm spiritually evolved, then what happens is I say, I'm feeding the presence of Christ in each one of them. And that's how you see things differently. Instead of being critical of other people or looking down at them, what you have is you have a way of seeing something in them that maybe they will see because of the way I see them. I think this is what I'm getting at. So that you just probably heard my sermon tomorrow, so you can skip it.
Steve has a question. Go ahead, Steve.
Father, it's good. Always good to see you. I got stuck right at the beginning of the talk when you were talking about loneliness, and what I thought I heard you say was the panacea, or the way to get over your loneliness is solitude. And I just kind of felt like when I'm lonely, I got to be with people, not by myself. I feel like that's my problem. I'm by myself and I need others. Did I hear this wrong and miss the whole message?
That may very well be your situation. And I would just suggest that you continue to examine it to make sure it's your situation. I know my situation is that I was lonely. I wasn't unlonely. I was lonely, but I tried to. I'm not sure I knew I was lonely when I was. I don't think I'd admit that I was lonely in my 20s because, as I said earlier, to say that you're lonely means you're a loser. Later on, we're more mature, we're able to do it. So I would say I would jump away from loneliness because I want to be a loser, and I would do something spontaneously, which was generally not very helpful, to get rid of my loneliness. It was only later that I found out, A, I was lonely, and B, that being with people wasn't necessarily going to do anything but bury a deeper need, which was for solitude. So when I was feeling lonely, most of the time, it was because I hadn't given myself enough time for solitude and silence. And when I did give myself enough time for solitude and silence, then I was less lonely. And then I could have as my next priority being with people, because I would be with them in a very healthy way. I'll tell you a healthy way it is. I would be with them and start listening to them instead of talking to them about my problems. And so it all worked together. It's just that I prioritized being with people because I was lonely, rather than prioritizing solitude and silence, so that the next thing I did was be with people. I mean, I was a priest. You're supposed to interact with people. But I would find myself interacting with people, and all of a sudden, sometimes it would just be that moment, and I feel this loneliness in the middle of a room of people. That should tell you something. It took me a long time to figure that out. So you just have to work it out yourself. My suggestion is that a lot of our solutions to feeling alone are secondary solutions. The primary solution is solitude and silence. The secondary solution is being with people and whatever else you do. Even Thoreau's writing that he did was probably not the first thing he did. He probably just sat in silence and stillness. Then he wrote.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are you in Breckenridge?
No, Boulder.
Oh, it's snowing up here.
It's
A
beautiful.
lot.
That's beautiful. Could I ask you one other question, not to monopolize, but I'm always struggling with this. When Christ resurrected, why did he not resurrect the way in the same body that he died in? And then it would have been very easy for everybody to just recognize him and see the miracle and everything. Why did he come back in a different body?
Well, I don't know that anybody has the answer to that, but my suggestion or my sense is that he did. He could be recognized. So a resurrected body is different because it's resurrected. And we don't know what that difference is, but it's not so different that he couldn't be recognized. What prevented the recognition, I think, was that people weren't ready for it. For instance, he had to sort of push the connection. So when he was in the cemetery with Mary Magdalene, I think it was, and he's talking to her, and she doesn't get it. She doesn't recognize it until he says her name, which is a way of some intimacy. And then, oh, the light goes on for her. I think, so he's present, he's recognizable, but only if you have the eyes to see. And you don't have the eyes to see if you are full of fear, anxiety, grief, remorse, a lot of things which were the anxieties, which were the feelings of COVID, for instance. So again, I think that what we do in a more contemplative practice is one of the things we let go of or we don't focus on is our fears, our anxieties. And then we become better able to recognize the presence of Christ where before we didn't see it. In Thoreau's situation, a tree is not just a tree, but it's just a tree to be cut down and used to build a house or for firewood if you can't see with the inner eye. So in a sense, resurrection is all about seeing with some sort of a deeper vision. So that's what I think it is. It's not that he's not recognizable or instantly by everyone, because he wasn't recognized by everyone. But you just have to be able to get over whatever it is that's getting in the way. In other words, resurrection is about changing us from the insides. You know, when he was walking around in the world before resurrection, he was talking to people about the kingdom of God, which is how to live a moral life and be of service to one another. But nobody picked up. I don't think many people picked up on that. And still today, not too many people are picking up on it. But so when he was raised, it was to show there's a lot more. And you got to get into a deeper place to get that a lot more.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Father Terry? We're almost up here.
This is Rosemary. May I speak?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Father Terry, on that subject, just one thing. I've been doing this centering prayer with Father Thomas for over 35 years at Melbourne, Florida. And I think you came to see us once. But anyway, the change in us, the way Father taught us with the prayer, how we change, and later people see you, they don't recognize you because of the change. You're still the same person, but you've changed. And that's how I felt about that, because people would say, you seem different to me. And I don't think so much the appearance, it was the attitude or what I was expressing or whatever, so I can see where there's a change in it, but it might not be recognizable to you, but to other people, there's a change in you and they see you differently. So that's one way of I could say looking at it. And one other thing I wanted to mention to you, when you talk about the cloud, have you read Menninger's Loving Search for God? It should be in your library there, The Loving Search for God, William Menninger.
No, write it down. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the one he does contemplative prayer and centering prayer together. And he goes chapter by chapter. It's excellent. So we've been doing that for 30 years.
Yeah, sometimes the way the first person to notice a change in you is not you, it's somebody else.
Yes, we don't think we've changed, but someone else will say, gee, you don't seem to be the same. What do I want to say? Like I was always having an attitude maybe about things, or whatever. And I like your collection of hats, by the way.
Oh yeah, I got lots more, but not here.
And thank you for everything.
Somebody did mention you can be lonely eating by yourself in a restaurant.
Yes.
But you can also not be lonely eating by yourself in a restaurant.
Yeah.
Depends upon what's going on inside of you.
Exactly.
I remember I was 30. I think it was my early 30s. Mid 30s, before I would go to a movie by myself, because I thought if you go to a movie by yourself, you're a loser. That's just the way it was. I just had to get over some of these things. You're not. But we're so acculturated to don't eat by yourself in a restaurant. Don't go to a movie by yourself. You're a loser. And so you're sitting at home in COVID. You think I'm missing something.
Yeah.
What you're missing is your inside. So we have to stay in touch with that.
Well, thank you.
I wanted to mention one thing. My sister Elizabeth was or is listening in on this, and she is always this is the way that other people influence you if you're open. She's a voracious reader and an interest in many different things. And so I have myself, I picked up some on that. It's if you're called or gifted in that direction, you pursue it, you never know when someone else will pick up on some of that. You just mentioned something, and she's just interested in many different things, and so she always has been. She's the most academic of my siblings, and I'll not be that, but it's a challenge for me to pursue that part of that interest and experiencing different things. I mean, the stuff I get out of the library. I got a book on from this guy, farmer, about Ebola and the diamond business in Sierra Leone, which is where I was supposed to go as a Peace Corps worker, by the way. I got another one on driving while black. Another one on recipes and contemplative prayer. I mean, I'm just interested in all kinds of things. And I often think of my sister Elizabeth that way too. So thanks, Bebs. All right, we on the way out here?
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Now we're going to be doing more of this. We're going to put it out on May 15th, Saturday. May 1st, no, the first Saturday in May, I'm giving a talk 9 a.m. and that's a continuation on Howard Thurman. So we got lots of things coming. We'll keep posting them on snowmassbookstore.com, okay? And this is recorded and will be shown. Will soon be up on snowmassbookstore.com where you can find it, okay?
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Maybe.